There's so much going on in the world. I mean, comedy writers keep saying, we have so much material, it's so unfair to other comedians in the past, so we're not even writing them. While we're, as a public, in the midst of all of that, we can't help but to have a front row seat to judging, to just accentuate, to amplify that sense of judgment. Because all we have to do is just look around, and it's unanimously promoted. It's being sounded from every nook and cranny in our society. So initially I was thinking of just focusing on patience, just making my talk be around that topic. However, I saw the connection of that with judgment and our seeking of comfort within judgment. So today's talk would be considered seeking comfort in judgment. It's so easy. In order for us to judge something or someone or a situation or ourselves, which usually is the case, we need to have a standard, a format, a tablet, or some type of a template. And that is nicely provided for by society, even while we're children. Our parents, teachers, then employers, and our spouses, even our children, our offspring. And then at large, just society itself. I'm just fascinated with how something happens, and then just like bees, we hover around it like honey. There's always some fascination that we have with anything that is happening outside of ourselves. Now, as far as Buddhism is concerned, as far as the Dhamma is concerned, that's a waste of time, ultimately. Now, Buddhism or the Dhamma does not teach us to be neglectful of our responsibilities, to expect a certain standard in our society of welfare, of equanimity, of empathic relationships. And we have quite a number of standards or principles given to us within the teachings itself to promote that foundation, whereby a society can live comfortably, happily, in a healthy way. So having said that, we have somehow carried over our childhood tendencies of wanting and expecting kindness around us. Teachers, whether kindergarten or ECE or elementary or later on, augmented by, supported by what we hear at our own households, by parent or parent figures or caregivers, that we need to be nice. People are good innately. All that carries over. And oftentimes, I find myself asking whether that is the case. And I invite you to do that. I mean, this is a path of curiosity. If there's any path out there, this is the one that I found it to be so. Because it invites investigation, asking of questions, and truthfully asking questions. So what is it that we are expecting the world to provide for us? Comfort, safety, some standard for us to feel like, yeah, we're in the right place. And if not, then we can just patch this up and that, and we need to, like when we move to a place and we see cobwebs, some cracks in the wall, the paint we don't like, it's too, I don't know why people still paint things like, teal in a certain like dull color. See, that gives you my own preferences, right? So I want to change certain things here and there, that, whatever, and then all of a sudden, now I can feel comfortable in this space. If not, I'm going to be loud about it, because there is an expectation that needs to be met. And that's how societies, in a way, unfold from one generation to the next. They pass on something to the other generations. Hopefully something good. So this is where our responsibility kicks in, to want to see justice, to want to see fairness, to want to see some kindness on behalf of those in ruling positions, etc. Okay, that's wonderful. Now that might take place, might not. My question to myself is always this: will I still feel uncomfortable being in that room full of cobwebs and cracks in the walls? Even when I've done everything I can or could, will I still feel comfortable there? Is my happiness dictated by what is around me? I don't have any answers to each of us, but all I have is my own position in understanding what it is that's compelling me to look for that. Interestingly enough, I find that it is that sense of safety that I'm looking for. Psychologists might say that it is that that state that we look for of comfort when we were in a fetal stage with our mothers, in that quiet darkness of just safety. And okay, that might be true, but it's been tested again and again that we do carry from our childhood, from the time we were infants, this sense of wanting to feel good, which comes from wanting to attach ourselves to a motherly figure or a caretaker who was playing that role, and that induces a certain chemical reaction in our brains. Whether it's dopamine or prolactin, those are the things that made us feel good. That's safety. Now, it's all good. It's all natural, right? Physiologically speaking, evolutionarily speaking, fine. But the danger, it seems, to lie in the fact that we have a tendency of carrying that expectation into the world we're living here, and expecting that from everywhere around us, and expecting that sense of kindness, those niceties, those social niceties. And unfortunately, many of us are being hypocritical when it comes to that, because we are having this sense of barbarism covered by this sense of this sheepskin of what looks like a kindness. Next time you say hello to someone and you're smiling, ask yourself, are you being authentic in that smile of yours? I mean, I've always mentioned how we need to have a smile on our faces, yes. And if you've ever listened to my talks in the past, I've always emphasized that. Yes, it's true, but there's a step before that. Where are we? Where is the mind? Where is our intention while we're doing this? while we're trying to connect? Is it true connection that we're seeking, or are we just looking at it from a selfish or self-centered position? I mean, we live in a culture, Western culture is based on the philosophical movement that has happened several hundred years ago, is geared towards finding that sense of individuality, which in many aspects is a wonderful attribute to have within us. It gives us room and space to find different potentialities within ourselves, instead of being just like pushed down because of the noise and the sounds of society that we're in, the tribe in a sense. Okay. And now we're seeing scientists, anthropologists, philosophers, psychologists all talking that in fact it is both. The individual and the social structure has to be there. Just like nurture and nature, there was that whole debate for many decades. Now it is discovered that it's actually both, a combination of both. And that's the field of epigenetics, where your own genes, your DNA, can in fact transform itself. The alleles or the traits within the genes themselves can be influenced by the social influences that you find yourself in. Obviously, when you are responding to those social influences and you're taking some steps, of course. Now that's where we are, it seems to me, in society today. I mean, we have a huge potential as a population in human history, currently, despite all the nasty news that we hear and we see, and we want to change. Okay. So where does that leave us? And this is where the aspect of patience comes in. And how to deal with these difficult times. I mean, this week I heard a few things, just like many of us here, and which I immediately started, caused my blood to boil when I heard certain things, by our, leaders, etc. And I was just, immediately my attention went outside, away from me. And it felt so comfortable. Because for a moment, I actually was free of looking at my sensations, my thoughts, my feelings. All I had was just being completely taken away by this, the acts or words of this entity out there. And I saw myself being pulled away into this flow, this powerful flow. It's very easy for us to do that, to allow that to take place, and to just have us be, taken for a ride in a sense. And we have plenty of standards to justify that by. Many of principles. No, he could not say that because of da-da-da-da-da, because we have these things, these principles, these values, da-da-da-da-da. Okay, all of what that is portraying is valid. No one can argue that in their right mind. But ultimately, what is that doing to my mind state, my emotional state? It's causing pain. It's causing dukkha. And that's why it really gets into the nitty-gritty aspect of our life. And that's why the Buddha chose, as the first noble truth of the fourth, dukkha, to start off with. He constantly mentioned how a person who understands dukkha is the person who can understand or experience nibbana. Now we all can claim that, yes, we all know dukkha, yeah. We understand dukkha, fine. But it has so many different layers. Dukkha has so many layers. What we really associate with is this, the aspect of dukkha which is called Vedana dukkha, or dukkha Vedana, which is feeling of dukkha, the feeling aspect of it. I just want to change this set of events that are causing me pain. Okay? I need it gone. I need that to be removed, eradicated. And if I can't, it is dukkha. So for about 2 weeks now, I've been dealing with a severe backache. I was just mentioning it to Nam, I've gone to see acupuncturists, massage therapists, chiropractors, etc. That's what happens when you're on a bus in India for 6 weeks. So, if you remember one of the talks I've mentioned about the 2 arrows the Buddha talked about. One arrow we cannot get rid of, and the other arrow is what the Dhamma is all about. The one that we cannot get rid of is the physical attributes that we have, we share, this body. We are shot with the arrow of pain, of suffering, of old age, of sickness and death, and everything that revolves around those phenomena. Every time, we're born. Every time you see a child, they are shot with that arrow, and that's it. But it's not a gloomy path in a sense, because the Buddha talks about that is an unavoidable phenomenon. The other arrow is what we are here to work with, which has a liberating aspect to it. And that is the psychological attachments we have towards the first arrow, the physiological pain, and everything else that comes with it. When I say physiological, obviously, we're talking about nama rupa, or physiology and psychology, which is involving the emotions. So the way we are holding on to our attachment to the way things are happening around us, that is the second arrow. For the last, a number of I believe, the last few years of the Buddha's life, he himself was dealing with severe backache. I can imagine much worse than the one that I just mentioned about myself. But his mind was completely tranquil, based on what you read in the suttas, based on what he has been explaining while he was in pain, based on what he was advocating still, even to the moment of his death. So, practicing what we preach in this path is very difficult, because the standards are quite high. Especially when you look and see how the Buddha placed patience as the highest virtue. Because from it, everything kind of trickles down. He even placed it as one of the paramis, which are the perfections which we have in Buddhism, alongside of perseverance or adhitthana, alongside wisdom, alongside equanimity, alongside of metta, generosity, dana, sila, which is virtue and discipline. So he had all these virtues and paramis for us to work towards, but at the same time, patience is the hardest, because you can easily crack under pressure when the situation is too much. And now I feel that most of us are finding ourselves within that state. There's too much. So what my point is in today's talk, in trying to deliver, is an invitation to have us not be taken in by the powerful tornado-like influences that we find ourselves surrounded by. Instead, to find that sense of solace within us in our practice, because there's a sentence I had read some time ago from a book written by Suzanne Jeffers, Dr. Suzanne Jeffers. The book title is Feel the Fear, but Do It Anyway. It's a wonderful book. And in it there's a sentence which I might not do it justice, but I'll paraphrase. She says something like, ships in harbor are safe, but that's not what ships were made for. And what I'm noticing is many of us are looking to be in safety constantly. You know, almost pathologically, we want to be surrounded by nice things, kind things, all the time. And it's kind of reminiscent of the way I personally, for one, used to live in when I was a child. I wanted everything to be like nicely, you know, cotton-like soft, and everything around me. I wanted people to be nice to me, my teachers, this and that. Oh, you want me to get a good grade in order for you to be kind to me? Oh, that's my reward? I'll work harder to get that. Boom, boom, boom. So we're always trying to reach out, to change ourselves simply to kind of match. In our present moment of experiencing life is being sacrificed for this ideal, non-existential attribute of life of it being somewhat kind or nice. But that's not what life is. So there's this Disney-esque way of looking that we still carry with ourselves as adults. Now, partly it has something to do with also the way we've been raised, and the way some of our leaders have as well. And this is where being, you know, as you know, I've had many students over the years, different ages, and someone was asking me, have you had any kids? You know, a few days ago, and I looked at him and I paused for a second, and I could see his, you know, perplexity. I was like, what is he waiting for? Either yes or no. So I was just like, excuse me, but I'm taking my time because I've had thousands of kids, in a sense. I've taken care of them. I've guided them as a teacher. I was their, you know, support, this, that. So it's kind of something that I equate with being a parent. And I loved them and I cared for them, and to this day many of them actually still keep in touch with me. Okay. Biologically, no, I haven't. But in different ways I have, apparently. So when I look at a child growing up, you know, we want, as adults, we want to give our children a kind of life or education that we might not have had, to improve their chances, to become a better version, perhaps, of themselves, or maybe of ourselves. So, in doing so, we protect them with extra layers of, I don't know, extra layers of expectations that are just going to be shattered. In the old Aboriginal tribes, for example, what, in the case of boys, what the tribesmen would do is take the boy after they reach a certain age and take him out into the wild. They would beat them. They would, in some tribes, they would circumcise them. They would really put them out there, or in other Native American tribes, they would just put them out there in the wild, and you go and you do your thing to survive in the wild. So basically what these tribes were doing, or are still doing in some parts of the world, is putting this child in a place where natural influences will help support him or her upbringing, preparing this person to become better equipped in dealing with realities of life, being a realist. And to me, that's what true essence of humanism is all about, because many people have asked, oh, what is Buddhism? Is it an existential tradition or a religion? What is it? And it is a humanist it's a realist, but it's also very much humanist in its construction, in its goals. Obviously, some philosophers will start, will argue when they hear me say that, but that's their problem. Because ultimately, you're dealing with realities of life. And how can we relate with those things? And it's very relational as well. Because we deal with not just ourselves, but with other people, other beings, the environment. Now, when we address all these factors, we see how patience, when guided by perseverance, because it's like, by the way, patience in Buddhism is different than patience in other traditions. For example, in Judeo-Christian traditions, we might think of, in fact, even the dictionaries say something to the effect of, patience is dealing with unpleasant situations and annoyances. Pain might be one of them, and just taking it. Buddhism says the same thing, however, it adds another aspect to that, a follow-up to that, which is we do take it, but we do not respond in any way or shape or form. Now, we don't just take it in, because that will turn into aggression and that will turn into aversion. We're working with that. We use that as a fuel. Not because we're meek, not because, well, our founder was like, I did it, you're going to have to deal with the suffering too. No, there is a purpose for that. So I had the image of persistence or perseverance as a map or a compass in the hands of a captain who happens to be the patience, who's out in rough seas. So patience is not just taking it from left and right. And that's what I notice some of us are experiencing these days. Every few days there's a new tweet, and every new days there's a new thing that's just shocking us. And it was like, really? Where does this stop? And so we find ourselves in a position where we're just being slammed around, punched left and right. We don't know where the next one's coming from. And that's making us very passive-aggressive and judgmental, obviously. Because it's happening, and I need to, close that gap, that crack in the wall. I need to cover it up, patch it up, right? Because it doesn't deserve to be in my world of peace and harmony and kindness and equanimity, whatever. But none of that is going to happen. What will happen is you experiencing of unpleasant situations, dukkha. That's when we start to slowly understand that there's a different realization of dukkha. And that's where wisdom comes in. It's not about you taking as much as you can. No one's going to come and give you an award at the end. No, the Buddha's not going to come and show up in your dream or something and say, here you go, here's a medal because you put up with this. There's no such thing. What will happen is a different layer of experiencing your life. A certain maturity comes in, contrary to what we had been brought up into thinking, which is, the world's going to be nice to you. The world's going to be kind if you do this and that and this and that. And ultimately you're going to die, but hopefully you're going to die with some loved ones around you, and you're going to die in peace, etc. All these are wonderful aspirations and hopes, assumptions in some cases. Now, we need to be careful after hearing these statements to not go overboard and say, we're being negative, we're just being too nihilistic, we're being just too, like, what's the point of living type of a thing. No. The Buddha, when he would talk about the Four Noble Truths to his monks and nuns and laity, In those days, many people, especially the monastics, they didn't wear shoes. And they would walk on some sharp objects every once in a while, and they would feel pain even while walking. That's just a tiny little example of realities that people faced, and they still do. What I'm saying is, let's focus on our own approach and on our own way of looking, interpreting these pains, these suffering-ridden situations we will find ourselves in. Because I too find myself constantly wanting to nicely pad up certain things in my life to kind of make them digestible, acceptable in my life. Let me just be this way towards this person, so I don't want to deal with that. You know, him or her talking to me that way. That is an opportunity for me to work on myself constantly. Now, when I work on myself, what's the ultimate goal? It's always to go back and see whether your viewing of the world has changed somewhat. Bottom line is, if we pad the world, the hard edges of situations around us, we are not doing ourselves a favor. As far as wisdom is concerned, understanding is concerned, we're the only species that scientists know of on this planet that has the ability to process what love is, to understand what experience is, to sit down and ponder about possibilities. My question is, why does it need to stop as we grow up? Why don't we not want to mature, really, as far as our wisdom, our discernment is concerned? So, in contrast to other traditions, other practices, this path is going to give you back your own responsibility to live your own life. There is no, as far as this path is concerned, the Theravada that I practice is concerned, no one's going to save you. There's not enough mantras you could say that can help you out. None of that. It's all about your own wisdom, how you handle your business, how you handle your life, and what you want to do about it. It's the same thing as we see in therapeutic sessions, where a client or a patient comes in and they develop over the years, especially in the case of psychoanalysis. In the old days, people still do actually, they pay huge amounts of money to keep going to see the same therapists for decades. Huge amounts of money. And you could buy a few houses with it. I'm not kidding. Why? Because there's this sense of, he or she's taking on my burden. And they might say one or two things, and then that's, you know, until the effect of it goes away. 2 days later, you're going to find yourself back into their office. So, how realistic are we in dealing with our own issues? And that's why, unfortunately, or I can't put a qualifier like that on it, but basically, Buddhism disappeared in India not long after the Buddha passed away. I mean, by the first 100 years after he passed away, when they were having their second council, the first council was held 3 months after the Buddha passed away. But 100 years afterwards, what happened was there were 18 different schools of thought in Buddhism, in the Dhamma. And each one was tooting their own horn, saying, no, 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 this is how it's supposed to be. This is heavy stuff for a person who's unwilling to just look at reality as it is. And that's what the statement is all about, that the Buddha used constantly, yatha bhutang pajanati. To be able to see things as they come to be, as they are. Not sugarcoating anything, not wearing rose-colored glasses, not having blind faith in anything except seeing things for what they are, meaning in this case your own experience, which is huge. I mean, there's a huge difference between trusting your experience and believing in something. So, how are we going to do it? It's all about that. What can I give you right now that you can use, other than some of these questions that I asked, which I personally don't have an answer for each of you, but I do know how I try to deal with it, and that's what I will be sharing with you. When a situation happens, when an experience is taking place within you, whether it's in your body, in your mind, you owe it to yourself, to your own existence, to your own highest principles, to come back to yourself and say, okay, what is the loudest experience I'm feeling right now? Is it rage? Is it a warmth? It doesn't have to be bad things, basically, that's what I'm trying to say. Anything, not being so preferential between the crack in the wall, the cobweb, or the teal colors. By the way, I love teal. It just depends on how it's arranged. So, how do we deal with those situations? You reach for a morsel of food and you're expecting certain things. Assumptions are there already playing tricks on you, and your mouth is watering, taste buds are going, yeah, and then you put it in your mouth and then all of a sudden the taste is not as expected. So at that moment, my invitation for you is not to look at that morsel of food, but look at your own experiencing it and how you're doing it. What is the leftover, the residual aspects of that experience? So if I was not expecting that flavor, automatically I'm feeling a certain sense of disappointment, maybe even anger. How dare you? Who put that morsel of food there, or the morsel who prepared the food? So it's all about you, nobody else. That's what this path is always saying. The outside factors are always going to be there, whether we're here or we're not. The world is still going to continue the way it is. But that urgency that we could have experienced in really doing something with our lives is gone. Every single breath you take is an invite, in fact, is an entry point to a living experience. And just approaching it in that way and going easy on yourself. Again, judgment, it's the easiest thing in the world. Let's not carry that sense of judgment from our childhood and bring it with us. While working with patients, I've always seen how painfully, like, we have that ball and chain with us everywhere we go, every relationship we find ourselves in. We have such a tremendous sense, it's so thick in our world. Our world is so saturated with that, but by some skillful means, we kind of put like an invisibility cloak around that. And then all of a sudden we turn our gaze toward this potential partner, or to this other person or other group of people or whatever, and just dump the judgment on them. And that's what we mean in psychology or in therapy, how it's a projection of what's really taking place within us. A person who's absolutely tranquil, calm with themselves, has space to forgive oneself and take it easy on themselves. As they say, take a chill pill. just is okay seeing some person outside of him who just does not fit any of those criteria. He's like, you know what? Yeah. You might actually chip in if there's an opening, if there's an invitation, if it's not going to generate more hostility or animosity, and is going to pull you in. If there is no such possibilities, then go ahead. Explore possibilities of kindness with such an entity, such a situation. Otherwise, come back here. It's a lifelong process. It's not easy. Many of the monks used to meditate and deal with their own issues. Monks are not safe from having these experiences. They have all the defilements unless they are, arahants. Just like us, they have to deal with difficulties of feeling lust, greed, or whatever that we do, aversion and indifference or ignorance. We all have this. What happened at the time of the Buddha was, even with this, and with this teacher with them, they still struggled. Many of them did not become even a Sotapanna. So it's hard. That's what I'm trying to say. That's the encouraging bit at the end of the talk. So we always have to do it. Just like when we were first starting to get up and start walking, for the very first time, we fell several times, and then finally we get up. So look for those moments, but don't give up. If you had given up, we would still be crawling. So have that faith in yourself and your skills, but that can only come when there is no judgment in the room, towards yourself first. So, yeah. Where did those minutes go? All right, thank you for listening. Can I ask if there's any questions?